Screamer. Noun. A phenomenon of 2000's internet in which a seemingly harmless video is interrupted by a loud noise. See also jump scare. It's also the name of Milestone's 2026 offering to the arcade racing world. An anime-inspired fighting game where, instead of throwing punches, you drive exotic cars around the dystopian, cyberpunk landscapes of Neo Ray City, as part of a tournament where everyone may nominally be divided into teams, but everyone is constantly at odds with everyone and looking to fix their own personal situation. This is going to be a wild ride. Screamer takes the Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010 approach to rebooting 90s arcade racers. Trim absolutely everything down to its barest essentials, then rebuild from there. For Hot Pursuit, that meant focusing on the cops and robbers gameplay, and expanding it with a high-intensity handling model and specialized equipment on both sides to take the fight from merely physical to something more. For Screamer, that meant taking what the Wikipedia page calls drifty handling and making it a separate control to normal steering, while giving each character special abilities that enhance their playstyle, like it's a hero shooter or something. This, in and of itself, may take some getting used to. Being an arcade racer, there's obviously a boost mechanic, which in this game has been turned into a quick time event. Holding the button to start the boost activation sequence, then releasing it at the right time for a longer, more powerful boost. One that's not always helpful when the courses get slow and twisty, meaning there are points where you deliberately go for the shorter boost. People online have tried to brand this as, "Oh, it's not a case of you lose out if you miss the timing," but let's be real here. On the straight, you absolutely do. That's how boost is longer works. But before you can boost, you need to generate sync, which you can do by manually shifting gear at the right time. Sync can also be used to generate a shield, which you'll need to survive when other drivers attempt to strike you. Striking is the game's main combat mechanic, activated by spending entropy, which is gained by using sync. Striking itself is basically the ram mechanic from Driver San Francisco, except it causes other cars to explode upon impact. Doing that grants you some extra sync, which you can spend on boosts and shields to generate entropy to strike more cars.
It says, in case of emergency, break glass with wrench. Hold on. This one says, use rock to break glass to get wrench to break glass to get rock. Ooh, I love logic puzzles. Let's see. If you break the glass with the...
Solved it.
But it gets more confusing, because if you fill the entropy bar, you can enter overdrive, which is basically a combination of all three abilities, making you extremely fast and able to take down opponents, but also means that if you as much as breathe on the track barriers or other obstacles, you explode. The risks may be great, but the rewards more than outweigh them. Further, each playable character has a special ability that changes the game in some way, whether it be making boosts even more powerful at the expense of the timing being random every time, being able to strike multiple times in a row if your entropy allows, or just filling both meters at the same time. Naturally, this means some characters at least feel more powerful than others, though whether or not that's just because I haven't learned to play to their strengths yet, I can't tell. So it's a good thing, then, that if you play the story mode, the game introduces you to all of these mechanics and characters bit by bit, to the point where it teases the combat part in one mission and then forgets about it for an hour. And maybe this is where I should talk about the tournament. The story follows 5 teams of 3 racers each as they take part in the Screamer tournament for a chance to win $100 billion. But that's somehow secondary to each and every one of them. Hiroshi, Frederick and Roshin of the Green Reapers are here to kill Gabrielle, who had their mentor murdered. Gabrielle himself is in the tournament to prove to his mother Abigail, CEO of one of the largest corporations in the world, that he can lead, despite his bodyguards Hope and Dirk plotting to kill him behind his back. Meanwhile, the J-pop crew of Strike Force Romanda struggles with relationship issues and grief, which puts them on collision course with the leader of the Jupiter Stormers, who in turn are obsessed with trying to figure out how the respawn mechanic works because yes, that's a plot point, because of a fellow love interest / friend's fatal accident. In short, it's a tried and tested cyberpunk world, but is it just me or is it starting to feel like there's one dial you have available for turning in that genre, and that's whether or not the corporate asshole and or the street rat dies at the end? Now there's an idea for a video essay I'll probably never get around to. Debunking cyberpunk as a genre, how Need for Speed Underground 2 ticks every single box in it, and why it's ultimately a meaningless term. Combined with it being an anime-inspired racing game in which disputes are settled by driving souped-up things that vaguely look like real cars, some more so than others, I'm getting massive Speed Racer vibes, which did throw me off for a bit. There's an alternate version of this script with a full diversion to just glazing that game, but if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do it justice the same way I am Screamer. There's also Kagawa Kai, but they join the story partway through, hijack the entire middle of it, and win the game by leaving before the final chapter commences. A final chapter that, of course, sees this racing tournament take to because the game suddenly decided it wasn't LEGO Racers enough. Also, if all of this sounds like a recipe for an intergalactic hostage situation, then congratulations, you have Cyberpunk Writer's Brain, and I'm sorry, because yes, it is terminal. And yes, I genuinely consider Kagawa Kai leaving early more of a spoiler than this, because the score challenge mode, which you can access from the very beginning of the game, will just give this much away. Now, I won't actually talk too much about the story because, well, it's Cyberpunk. I wouldn't want to spoil which of the 3 possible endings this game goes for. Which is kind of a shame, because the last race is awesome. Does it take too long to get going? I'd argue so, yes. Is the Kagawa Kai story ultimately padding a plot that would have only been, checks notes, about 10 hours long if they weren't part of it? Also yes. But do I care? Not as much as you'd think, because in addition to the gameplay itself being surprisingly good once you wrap your head around it, the game also scores very highly in another fairly important regard. Presentation. I don't have a lot of experience with anime. All I know is that I like the slight cell shading filter on everything, in-game or cutscene. I enjoy the dialogue being presented by what I can only describe as a bunch of JPEGs, which would feel very Tokyo Extreme Racer if not for this being an entirely separate style to that. Hell, I adore the fact that completing the story unlocks a whole new team to play as in all the other modes. But the thing I love the most is the soundtrack. Yes! 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 If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen, because someone is cooking! This is anime cyberpunk Grid Legends, and I can't put into words just how on board I am with that. I mean, seriously, a racing game that has both style and substance. That's a rarity these days. And that, I think, can be said for just about every part of this game. Sure, it may need just a little more on the stove at a low heat, but if Milestone's Hot Wheels games are anything to go by, I'm fully on the hype train for Screamer 2. In fact, I'm gonna say it. This is a worthy racing game of the year, if not outright GOTY contender. It's a good thing there isn't one other obvious release to steal the racing game crown and another that's locked in every other award. Yeah, who am I kidding? Screamer could not have released at a worse time than the year of the Sixes. Look, I'm not saying I'm not enjoying Forza Horizon 6, because I am enjoying it. Wait, are you doing what I think you might be? You are! You devious hidery fuck you are! And I'm not saying GTA 6 will be bad, even if that would be hilarious. What I'm saying is, it's a shame that these two dominate their respective genres to the point where barely anyone can be bothered to challenge them, because they know they'll have lost. That's the sort of sorry state games are in these days, I guess. It's nothing short of a miracle that something as good as Screamer is allowed to merely exist in this world. A simple game that knows exactly what it wants to be, isn't afraid to be a bit different, has tons of ways to customize your racing experience. Sure, there's a cosmetics pack or two, but other than that, it remains to be seen if it can be allowed to just be a game without diving into scummy business practices. And how ironic would it be if the anime cyberpunk racing fighting game was the one to buck that trend.